When I was living in New York, I came in contact by accident with a lot of interesting people. I mean, I had met the book writer Thomas Meehan, who wrote Annie, and he worked on The Producers and Hairspray and so many things. And I found myself standing in the back of the Laura Pell's Theater. There was a Death Takes a Holiday musical that didn't go very well, but great people were in it, and I thought it was a good idea. And I'm standing in the back of the theater with Thomas Meehan, chit-chatting with him about how it was going, and this was previews for the show. So Thomas Meehan's sitting in the back, and I walk up to him, and I go, "Hey, it's Michael Jackson from MTI," because I work for Music Theater International, which handles Annie and Hairspray and The Producers. So he was in the office often, and I had met him on several occasions because of that. So it wasn't much to go up to say hi, and he says, "Oh yes, hi, how are you doing?" And so I started talking to him about the show, and Maury Yeston was the writer, and we were talking, and he says, "Well, what do you think?" I said, "Well, I love the idea of this story. I feel like there needs to be something more jazzy in the middle of that first act. It's awfully ballad heavy." And he thought, yeah, he agreed, but there wasn't, Maury Yeston hadn't written anything that could serve for that purpose. He goes, "But there is something like that in the second act." And anyway, we just had a little conversation about it, and so we were back there just discussing that kind of stuff, and I thought, how cool, there's not very many times in my life when I'm going to be sitting next to a Broadway musical theater legend, a man of importance in that field, and having a casual conversation about his show that is brand new, that's going to open. My experience with Music Theater International allowed for that sort of relationship to work, because I could walk up to somebody and say, "I'm from Music Theater International," they'd immediately respond to you. So I'm looking at this picture of the artist, and I'm looking down the hall, and I'm seeing him there and knowing that's him. So I walked up to him and I introduced myself, and I said, I was just looking at this caricature on the wall of you and saw you here and figured, well, there's the artist. And he says, "Yes, hello," and he introduced himself, and I asked him about this Mary Poppins issue, that he wasn't credited for the scenery that he had worked on, and he explained that he wasn't in the union, so they couldn't, and there was an art director on there, and he was the chief art director, but a lot of the work was farmed out, to other people. There's a big stable of artists there who all worked on stuff together, so it was very collaborative. So it wasn't that weird that he would be in there doing a lot of things, and he was sort of the British expert on hand that they used for getting the interiors right and the look of the street and Cherry Tree Lane and all that. So that was interesting. Then he told me another story. He says, "I came to work one day and the glass was broken up in the area where Walt Disney's office was. And I came in there and he was there still in the same suit from the day before, and he had been working all night on something. And he poked in the door, and it was really early, and it was before the secretary had arrived or anything. And he says, "What happened?" And Walt Disney said, "Well, I got really hot in here, and I realized we hadn't designed this thing so you could open the windows and get some air, and the air turned off at a certain point last night. And I felt like I was suffocating, so I threw a chair through the window so I could get some air." So that's why the window was broken. He had thrown a chair through just so some air could come in, because he didn't know how to turn on the air conditioning again and get some circulation going. So anyway, that had nothing to do with anything, but it was just the story that popped out of Tony Walton's mouth to me in the hallway at the York Theater several times. Oh, another person, Kitty Carlisle Hart. I saw her all the time, but she actually came into the office because our CEO, Freddie Gershon, was making a video, I think for Mike Wallace for his birthday. And Kitty Carlisle Hart came in to sing at the piano, and Freddie played the piano while she sang something for Mike Wallace. This is my memory of why she was there, I think. She was in this beautiful red sort of skirt, suit, little jacket, pearls, and that jet black hair that she had. And she was standing by where I was sitting and said, "Are any of Moss's plays here?" Meaning, do we handle anything by Moss Hart? And I thought, no, we don't.
Alone with a sky of romance above.
she sat behind me and Steve Minnow, friend Steve Minnow, at a production, and she was just talking. She had a little powder blue suit and again the pearls, and she was with some elderly, distinguished gentleman friend who was escorting her to this show we were seeing, and she said she was going through her itinerary, and at this time she's got to be 90 years old about at the time I'm hearing this, and she's talking about how she's going to London, and then she has to go to Palm Springs where she's going to do her cabaret act, age 90, and then she was going to go to LA to do another documentary, and she sort of said that in this weary way. And for the last 10-15 years at that point, she was in a lot of documentaries. She was a go-to person to talk about the Marx Brothers because she was in A Night at the Opera, or to talk about old Broadway because she was married to Moss Hart and she was in operettas and things back in the day. So she was somebody that she was friends with George Gershwin, so she could talk about that. She could talk about Cole Porter. She knew Cole Porter. So this woman was really a part of the golden era, knew everybody, and she was in documentaries all the time. So that's why she was another documentary. And Steve, I'm just listening to it, not discussing it with Steve, and he goes, "Are you hearing this?" I said, "Yes." So I got up because I knew she was there and I barely saw, but I didn't want to turn around because she was right here behind me. And so I got up to pretend to go to the bathroom or get a program or something because I wanted to see what she was wearing. But it was a powder blue suit. But there was another time that was hilarious, and I saw her in Central Park walking in a purple suit with a little cane that had jewels on it, walking with some young woman who could have been her daughter or just somebody who was an assistant or something, but she was always dressed so beautifully and perfectly in Chanel suits and things. But there was one time she was walking, it was like, I was on my way to work because that was this route I took down 54th Street from Broadway. She was crossing there towards the Broadway Theater and the Ed Sullivan Theater where David Letterman was being filmed. For some reason, she was crossing that block, and this truck comes along and honks this big horn. They have those big like wah horns that you get from those big trucks. But she had stepped sort of into the street, and this horn honks, and she looks up at the guy and goes, "Hello!" And it was the most funny thing I ever saw in my life. And also from Comden and Green, the writing team, Adolph Green, I saw him. I think I was in a theater with him a couple of seats away from me, one direction or another, 6 times. And every time I'd see him there, he would fall asleep during the production. He'd just, and sometimes he'd be with Phyllis Newman, his wife, and I don't know if I always saw her with him, but he would be there. And I was at Carnegie Hall and he was in the box next to me, and that was 3 times into seeing him. I thought, is this guy at everything I ever do? And I went to see Barbara Cook at Carnegie Hall, and there was another box on the other side, and he was still beside me. And I just thought, it's so funny how many times I'm in the theater with Adolph Green in his later years, sleeping through this or that production. Anyway, you saw things like that. Nathan Lane came into the office and got a spook because he had done the book for the Frogs, which had Stephen Sondheim songs, and we had painted a version of Matthew Broderick and Nathan Lane and the producers around the door down the hallway. We had this artist that came in and would paint things from our shows all over the walls, and so we had the producers in there now. And when you come down that hallway, you see Nathan Lane at the end holding the side of the door with Matthew Broderick, and he sort of came down there with Larry, the music specialist that authors would work with when they were making sure the materials were what they needed to be before we released a new show. Well, Nathan Lane goes walking down and sees it, goes, "Ah!" It was... and along those lines, Mel Brooks came in to the office because of the producers and introduced himself all around, and he really went around to everybody and said hi, and I said, "Hi, my name, believe it or not, is Michael Jackson." He goes, "Oh, the other Michael Jackson," which my friend Katie thought was the most hilarious thing in the world, and she repeats that story constantly. It's not that funny, except that I got a little bit more than, how do you do? The other Michael Jackson, which is true, I am the other Michael Jackson. And with that, I part and say adieu. Thanks for watching.